The Christmas roast smelled like turkey and treachery. My son David stood up, champagne flute trembling in his hand, his voice slicing through the holiday warmth like a blade through silk. "Dad, we've made a decision. You're no longer welcome in this family. Pack your things and get out of our house." The guests froze mid-bite. His wife Rebecca sat there with that satisfied smirk I'd grown to despise, her eyes gleaming with victory. I simply smiled back, reaching into my jacket pocket. "Well, David, since we're exchanging gifts," I placed a manila envelope on the table. "Here's something special for you, son." His hands shook as he tore it open. The scream that followed could have shattered the crystal glasses. Every eye in the room was on him, but they had no idea that my revenge was just beginning. They thought they had destroyed me. They were so very, very wrong. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. The dining room reeked of roasted potatoes and resentment. The ancient mahogany table, scarred from decades of family gatherings, now bore the weight of our latest battle. Cold plates sat abandoned, coffee growing bitter in chipped mugs that had once held warmth and laughter. David paced at the head of the table, his face crimson, gesturing like a man conducting an orchestra of chaos. Rebecca sat across from me, arms folded, her perfectly manicured nails drumming a rhythm of contempt against the wood. I gripped my coffee mug, its warmth the only comfort in this Arctic wasteland of family dysfunction. "Dad, we need that money," David snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This house is crumbling around us. You can't keep hoarding cash while we're drowning here." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice level despite the fire building in my chest. "Hoarding? Son, I paid the mortgage on this place before you were even a thought. What's this really about?" Rebecca leaned forward, her smile thinner than winter ice. "It's about progress, Robert. We want to modernize, new flooring, new furniture. You wouldn't understand modern living." Oh, I understood plenty. The repairs were just a smokescreen. Rebecca's phone, propped against her wine glass like a shrine, displayed photos of leather furniture that cost more than my first car. David, still pacing, slammed a contractor's estimate onto the table, bloated with unnecessary upgrades I knew they'd already spent in their minds. "You've got savings, Dad," David pressed, his voice climbing higher. "What's the point of sitting on money? You're not getting any younger, and frankly, neither are we." The jab hit its mark, but I kept my eyes on the table, tracing a familiar groove where David, at 10 years old, had carved his initials with a butter knife, back when he still looked at me like I hung the moon and stars. "I've given you enough," I said quietly. "You live here rent-free. That's more than most get." Rebecca actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass wrapped in silk. "Rent-free? Robert, this place is a museum. We're doing you a favor by staying and keeping it from falling apart." David slammed his palm on the table, making the silverware jump. "You're so damn selfish. You think you're some kind of saint, but you're just a bitter old man holding everyone back." The room fell silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. I tightened my grip on the mug until my knuckles went white. This wasn't the first time he'd raised his voice, but something felt different now. Final. Raw. Rebecca's eyes glittered with triumph, like she'd been orchestrating this explosion for months. I could have listed every sacrifice. The overtime shifts, the college tuition, the car I sold to buy his first junker. But words bounce off stone, and that's all they'd become. "Selfish," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air like smoke. "That's what you think of me." David leaned closer, wine heavy on his breath. "That's exactly what I think. You're not needed here anymore, Dad. We can handle this place without you dragging us down." The air shifted, heavy with the weight of his declaration. Rebecca's lips twitched, barely containing her satisfaction. I set the mug down with deliberate care and stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood, a sound that seemed to echo forever. I looked at David, then at Rebecca. Their faces were mirrors of greed and certainty. They thought they'd won some great victory. "I see," I said, my voice steady despite the inferno in my chest. You've made yourselves crystal clear. I turned toward the hallway, my boots heavy on the floor. David called after me, his tone mocking. What? That's it? You're just going to sulk now? I didn't answer. The dining room door loomed ahead, its chipped paint a reminder of better days. As I reached for the knob, one thought burned through the haze of betrayal. I'd given him everything, my time, my dreams, my home. No more. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their voices. I stood in the dark hallway, my pulse finally steadying. They thought they could break me. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. My bedroom was a shrine to ghosts, every corner holding memories of the life I'd built and lost. The wooden bed frame creaked as I sat down, the mattress sagging from years of restless nights. A single lamp cast amber light across the room, catching dust motes dancing over a framed photo of my late wife Elena and David when he was 6, gap-toothed grin beaming at the camera. How different that smile was from the sneer that had just torn my heart in half. I opened the bedside drawer, pulling out a weathered photo album. Its leather cover was worn smooth from countless late-night sessions of remembering better times. Flipping through, I stopped at a picture of David at 16, football uniform muddy, eyes bright with dreams I'd helped fund. I'd sold my Chevy to pay for his college applications, telling Elena it was just a car. She'd squeezed my hand, her knowing smile saying she understood the sacrifice. We'd both believed it was worth it. We'd both believed in him. Another page revealed David's graduation photo. I'd worked double shifts to cover his tuition, my back screaming from construction sites, but that hug he gave me that day, his cap askew as he promised to make me proud, had made every aching muscle worth it. He'd never said thank you. Not once. After Elena's cancer stole her from us 3 years ago, David drifted further away, leaving me to rattle around this house like a marble in an empty jar, until Rebecca arrived with her calculating eyes, sizing up our home like it was already hers. I found a yellowed receipt tucked between pages, a tuition payment for $15,000, dated 2007. I'd drained my savings account for it, telling myself it was an investment in our future. His future, our legacy. Instead, he brought home a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to overcome. The album snapped shut. I set it aside, my gaze falling on Elena's photo beside the bed. Her gentle curls, her warm brown eyes that had always steadied me when the world felt too heavy. Liz, I whispered, my voice rough with unshed tears. I gave him everything. But it wasn't enough, was it? The weight of years pressed down on me, but underneath the grief, something else was stirring. Something harder, sharper. I stood and crossed to the window. Outside, snow fell in heavy, lazy flakes, blanketing the street in pristine white. The neighborhood slept peacefully, Christmas lights twinkling through the haze like distant stars. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, my reflection staring back, gray hair, tired eyes, but a jaw set with newfound purpose. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited patiently for scraps of affection. For what? To be told I wasn't needed anymore? A memory surfaced. David at 8, slamming his bedroom door after I'd grounded him for breaking a neighbor's window. Even then, he'd had that temper. But he'd always come back eventually, sheepish and sorry. That boy was gone. The man he'd become didn't deserve my patience, and Rebecca certainly didn't deserve my house. I picked up my phone from the nightstand, its screen glowing blue in the dim room. My thumb hovered over Marcus's contact. He'd know what to do. Someone who'd seen the world's ugliness and still came out swinging. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless. I wasn't a victim anymore. I'd been their foundation for too long, letting them build their dreams on my sacrifices. It was time to build something new. Something that would show them exactly what selfish really looked like. The rusty anchor smelled of whiskey and worn leather, its dim lighting casting long shadows across scarred wooden tables. I sat in a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking as I leaned forward, hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon that I hadn't touched. Across from me, Marcus sipped his beer, his weathered face creased with concern. We'd been friends since our army days, and later when we argued over construction contracts back when life still made sense. Now he was a retired paralegal with a talent for cutting through legal red tape. I told him everything. David's shouting match, Rebecca's cold calculations, the way they'd tried to gut me with words while sitting at my own table. Marcus listened, his gray eyes narrowing with each detail, the lines on his face deepening like cracks in old concrete. When I finished, he set his glass down with a sharp clink. "They're vultures, Robert," he said, his voice gravelly from too many cigarettes. "Think they can pick your bones clean because you're old and weak. You gonna let them?" I shook my head, meeting his steely gaze. "I'm done being their doormat." Marcus grinned, a rare expression that usually meant trouble for someone. "Good. Hit them where it hurts most, money and pride. Find their weak spots and press until they scream." I nodded, my mind already churning. David was impulsive, always chasing the next shiny object, a new truck, a bigger TV, anything to keep up appearances. Rebecca was worse. Her entire identity was built on showing off a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Her social media was a carefully curated lie of luxury and success. They thought they could bully me out of my own home. Time to show them what decades of careful planning could accomplish. "Legally," I added, meeting Marcus's knowing look. "No mistakes?" He chuckled, leaning back in the booth. "Spoken like the guy who triple-checked every contract I ever wrote. You've got this, Robert. They have no idea who they're messing with." I pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. My pen scratched across the page as I wrote a single word at the top. Accounts. David's finances were a disaster. I'd seen the overdue notices he tried to hide, the way Rebecca's face went pale when restaurant bills arrived. That was my starting point. "You're scarier than I thought," Marcus said, raising his glass. "To justice." I clinked my untouched bourbon against his beer. "To consequences." The bar hummed with quiet conversation and the distant sound of a jukebox playing some old Johnny Cash tune, the kind Elena used to hum while cooking Sunday dinner. I pushed the memory away. Nostalgia wouldn't help me now. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "You sure about this? Once you start pulling threads, there's no going back." I exhaled slowly and turned the light back on, continuing my reconnaissance mission. More papers revealed the full scope of their financial disaster. A wine club subscription, spa treatments, a vacation to Cancun they'd taken while I was working overtime to keep the lights on. Every receipt was another thread in the web they'd woven, and I was mapping it out with the precision of the engineer I'd once been. I knew how to find structural weaknesses, pressure points that could bring down entire buildings. Their finances were already crumbling. I'd just make sure they felt every tremor. Another creak, closer this time. Slow, heavy footsteps on the stairs. David. I snapped the notebook shut, shoving it deep into my pocket as I carefully arranged the papers back into their messy pile. The flashlight went dark, and I slipped toward the kitchen door like smoke. My hand found the doorframe, the wood cool and familiar under my fingers. I paused, listening as the footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen. "Dad?" David's voice was groggy, suspicious. "You down there?" I didn't answer. My pulse was steady now, my mind sharp and focused. They'd given me everything I needed wrapped up in their own carelessness like a gift. I eased the door open just wide enough to slip through, the hinges silent from years of my careful maintenance. The hallway stretched before me, dark and welcoming. David's shadow moved past the kitchen doorway, but I was already gone, melting back into the shadows of the house I knew better than my own heartbeat. They thought they were so smart, so careful. They had no idea they'd just handed me the ammunition to destroy them. The law office felt like stepping into the future, all glass walls and steel fixtures, the air sharp with the scent of expensive coffee and fresh ink. I sat across from Jonathan Pierce, my old jacket draped over the chair like a relic from another era. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, its towers glinting under a pale winter sun. Jonathan, crisp navy suit, silver hair perfectly styled, scanned my handwritten notes with the intensity of a surgeon reading x-rays. I'd known him from my engineering days when we'd sorted out contract disputes and liability issues. He was sharp, discreet, and had a reputation for never losing. "You're absolutely certain about this, Robert?" he asked, his voice low and measured. "This is nuclear. Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." I nodded, my hands steady on the polished conference table. "They drew first blood, Jonathan. I'm just finishing what they started." He leaned back, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against his chin. "All right, let's start with the will. You want David completely disinherited?" "Completely." The word tasted like ashes, but I forced it out. "Everything goes to the Children's Hospital Foundation." A pang of grief hit me. David was still my son, still the boy who'd once built blanket forts in the living room. But that innocent child was gone, replaced by a man who'd looked me in the eye and called me worthless. Jonathan slid a document across the table. The new will was pristine, clinical, final. Every clause was airtight, every loophole sealed. I read it twice, my old contractor habits kicking in, then signed with a steady hand. The second document was a bank authorization, freezing the joint account David still used, a relic from when I'd helped him buy his first car. He'd never bothered to close it, and now that laziness would cost him dearly. I pulled out my phone, dialing the bank. 3 minutes and a few security codes later, the account was locked tighter than Fort Knox. David wouldn't know until he tried to buy his morning coffee. "Now for the house," Jonathan said, sliding another stack of papers toward me. "I'm suggesting a trust with you as the sole trustee. They can't force a sale, can't claim ownership, can't even breathe on it without your permission." I signed where he pointed, each stroke of the pen feeling like building a fortress around everything I'd worked for. The house was my last sanctuary, built with my own hands and Elena's dreams. I'd be damned if I let them turn it into their personal ATM. "You know," Jonathan said, stacking the papers with practiced efficiency. "This isn't going to be easy, Robert. They'll fight back, probably get their own lawyer." I met his gaze, my jaw set like concrete. "Let them try. I've got something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth." My phone buzzed in my pocket. David's name flashed on the screen, a missed call that made my pulse quicken. He was already feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. Jonathan noticed my slight smirk. "They're calling already?" Like clockwork. I tucked the phone away without answering. "How long before the eviction notice is ready?" "End of business today." "You want it served personally?" "Christmas dinner," I said, savoring the words. "Let it be my gift to them." Jonathan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't comment. He'd seen enough family wars to know that sometimes the nuclear option was the only one left. I stood tucking the folder of documents under my arm. Their weight felt like justice incarnate. "Thank you, Jonathan. Send me the bill." He waved dismissively. "First consultation's free for old friends. Besides," he grinned, "I have a feeling this is going to be more entertaining than anything on television." The office door whispered shut behind me. I stood in the marble lobby watching snow fall past the windows like confetti at a funeral. My phone buzzed again, another call from David that I ignored. Let him panic. Let him wonder. Let him get just a tiny taste of what helplessness felt like. I had work to do, and Christmas dinner was only 2 days away. The living room glowed with the sickly blue light of the television, some reality show babbling in the background while David paced like a caged animal. His phone was glued to his ear, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked suspiciously like fear. Rebecca lounged on our leather sofa, the one they'd bought without asking, claiming it was a household improvement. Her legs crossed with practiced elegance. but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the armrest. I stood in the kitchen doorway, hidden in shadow, my phone recording every word of their private meltdown. They had no idea I was there, no idea the walls were crumbling around them. "You see this?" David thrust his phone toward Rebecca, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "The account's frozen. I tried to pay the car loan and it bounced. Bounced." Rebecca raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her tone cool as winter air. "Calm down, David. It's probably just a system error. Call the bank in the morning." "I did call," David exploded, flinging a magazine across the room, its pages scattered like wounded birds. "They said it was locked by the primary account holder. That's Dad, Rebecca. He did this." I pressed closer to the door frame, my grip tightening on the phone. The bank had moved faster than I'd expected, but then again, money talks, and mine had been talking to them for over 30 years. Rebecca shifted on the sofa, her mask of calm starting to slip. "Your father? Why would he bother with something so petty?" "Because he's a vindictive old bastard," David snarled, resuming his pacing. "Ever since we told him the truth about this place, he's been sulking like a child. You heard him at dinner, acting all high and mighty." Rebecca's lips curved into that calculating smile I'd grown to despise. "Then maybe it's time we accelerated our timeline. This house is too big for one old man anyway. We could sell it, move somewhere better, somewhere more suited to people our age." My chest tightened, but I kept the phone steady. Sell my house? The one I'd built with Elena, where we'd raised David, where her laughter still echoed in the walls? They weren't just greedy. They were sociopaths. David stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. "You think we can just kick him out?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's old, David, vulnerable. We'll say it's for his own good. Find him a nice little apartment somewhere affordable. The house stays with family where it belongs." Family. The word burned in my throat. I was the one who'd sacrificed everything for this family, and they were planning to discard me like yesterday's garbage. "But he won't go quietly," David said, running a hand through his hair. "You know how stubborn he is. He'll fight us every step of the way." Rebecca stood, smoothing her designer dress. "Then we make it uncomfortable for him to stay. We're younger, stronger. We have options he doesn't." She moved to the window, checking the locks with the efficiency of someone planning a siege. Thorough, I'd give her that. But not thorough enough. My phone vibrated softly as the recording saved automatically. Their voices, their plans, their cold calculation, all of it trapped in digital amber, ready to be used against them. I eased back from the doorway, my boots silent on the kitchen tiles. They thought they were so clever, plotting my demise in my own living room, but they just handed me everything I needed to destroy them. The kitchen door closed behind me, with barely a whisper. I stood in the darkness, the phone warm in my palm, its screen showing 43 minutes of recorded evidence. They wanted to play hardball? Fine. But they were about to learn that their old man had been playing this game since before they were born, and I played to win. I stood on my own porch like a stranger, staring at the gleaming new deadbolt that mocked me with its brass shine. My house key, worn smooth from decades of daily use, was as useless as I apparently was in their eyes. The December wind cut through my jacket as I fumbled with the lock again, the metal scraping uselessly against metal. Snow clung to my boots and the porch railing, making everything look pristine and peaceful. Everything except the rage building in my chest. They'd moved fast, faster than I'd given them credit for. Earlier that morning, I'd intercepted a voicemail David left for his cousin Jake. The message was pure performance art, worried son concerned about his increasingly unstable father, who'd lost touch with reality and couldn't manage his own affairs anymore. They'd hired a lawyer, spread their poison to every relative who'd listen, painted me as a senile old fool who needed protection from his own incompetence. Now this, the ultimate insult, locked out of my own home. I circled the house like a detective at a crime scene, testing windows and checking doors. Every entry point was sealed tight, secured with new hardware that probably cost more than their last mortgage payment. The side door that led to my workshop was locked. The basement entrance I'd installed myself 30 years ago, locked. They'd turned my sanctuary into a fortress with me on the outside looking in. Through the living room window, I could see movement. David's shadow pacing back and forth, probably on the phone with their lawyer. Rebecca would be nearby, orchestrating their next move with the cold precision of a chess master. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "They changed the locks," I said without preamble, keeping my voice low despite being alone in my own yard. Marcus's laugh was harsh, humorless. "Bold move for a couple of amateurs. You got a backup plan?" "Working on it," I said, my eyes never leaving the house. "They're telling everyone I'm mentally incompetent, probably trying to get guardianship or some legal authority to make decisions for my own good." "Classic move," Marcus said. "Isolate the target, control the narrative." But they made one mistake. "What's that?" "They're not dealing with some helpless old fool, they're dealing with you." My phone buzzed with an incoming text. My sister-in-law, Linda. "Robert, I'm worried. David says you're not well. Please call me." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. They'd gotten to Linda too, poisoned her mind with their carefully crafted lies. How many others had they turned against me? The sting of betrayal was sharp, but underneath it was something harder. Something that had been forged in the furnace of disappointment and tempered by years of being taken for granted. I pocketed the phone without responding. Let them spread their stories. Let them think they'd isolated me completely. They'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd built this house with my own hands. Every beam, every pipe, every wire. I knew its secrets better than they knew their own names. And I was just getting started. The coffee shop hummed with holiday energy, its mismatched chairs filled with last-minute shoppers nursing lattes and checking gift lists. I sat near the window, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug, watching snow dust the sidewalk outside. Across from me, Nancy twisted her red scarf nervously, her kind eyes filled with worry. She'd been Elena's closest friend for over 20 years, one of the few people who still made time for the widower left behind. "Robert," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard something disturbing. Something you need to know about." I took a sip of coffee, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm listening." Nancy glanced around the cafe like she was about to reveal state secrets. "David and Rebecca are planning something big for Christmas dinner. They've invited everyone. Linda, your cousins, the Hendersons from next door. Everyone." "What kind of something?" She hesitated, her spoon clinking against her cup. "They're going to make an announcement. About you." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth, but I didn't react. "What kind of announcement?" "They're saying..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They're saying you're not capable of taking care of yourself anymore. That you've lost control of your finances, your judgment. They want to convince everyone that you need supervision." The word hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Supervision, guardianship, legal control over every aspect of my life. "They're using Christmas dinner as their stage," Nancy continued, her voice heavy with disgust. "Getting everyone together so they can present a united front. Make it look like the whole family agrees." I pulled out my phone, opening my notes app. My thumbs moved quickly. Christmas dinner. Family gathering, public announcement, guardianship play. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Linda mentioned it yesterday. She's conflicted. She loves you. But David's been calling her every day, filling her head with stories about your episodes and concerning behavior." Nancy's eyes flashed with anger. "Rebecca's been particularly busy, calling everyone and painting herself as the concerned daughter-in-law just trying to protect her husband's poor, confused father." I nodded, my mind already churning. So that was their endgame. Not just stealing my house, taking complete control of my life, making me a prisoner in my own existence while they pillaged everything I'd worked for. There's more, Nancy said reluctantly. They've been telling people you're a danger to yourself, that you shouldn't be living alone. A memory flashed. Elena's funeral. David standing beside me at the graveside, his arm around my shoulders as we watched them lower the love of my life into the ground. He'd whispered, "We'll get through this together, Dad. I'll take care of you." How quickly those words had turned to ash. "What are you going to do?" Nancy asked, studying my face. I met her gaze, my jaw set like concrete. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want." Her eyebrows rose. "What does that mean?" I stood, dropping a $5 bill on the table. "It means they want a performance at Christmas dinner. They'll get one." The cafe door jingled as I stepped outside, the cold air sharp against my face. Snow fell in lazy spirals, each flake a tiny promise of the storm that was coming. They thought they could humiliate me in front of our family and friends, use the warmth of Christmas to mask their betrayal. They'd built their trap with care, baited it with lies, and now they were waiting for me to stumble into it. What they didn't realize was that I'd been building traps of my own, and theirs was about to spring shut around them. The law office conference room felt like a war room, its polished table covered with documents that would reshape 3 lives forever. Jonathan sat across from me, his silver hair catching the afternoon light as he organized the papers with surgical precision. "Everything's ready," he said, sliding the first stack toward me. "Eviction notices for David and Rebecca, legal, ironclad, and effective immediately upon service. They'll have 30 days to vacate." I picked up the notice, scanning the formal language that would shatter their world. 30 days. After 30 years of sacrifice, they'd get 30 days to find somewhere else to play house with other people's money. "The account freeze is already in effect," Jonathan continued. "Every joint account, every line of credit tied to your name, locked tight. They won't be able to access a penny." He opened a thick folder revealing a mountain of evidence I'd compiled over the past weeks. Bank statements showing their reckless spending, screenshots of Rebecca's social media posts flaunting luxuries they couldn't afford, the recorded conversation from their living room where they'd plotted to declare me incompetent. "This is beautiful work, Robert," Jonathan said, his voice filled with professional admiration. "If they try to fight this in court, we'll bury them in their own greed." I nodded, signing each document with steady hands. Every signature was a nail in the coffin of their schemes. The final piece was a letter, written in legal language but carrying the weight of biblical judgment. It outlined their debts, their lies, their recorded confession of fraud. It would be my gift at Christmas dinner, delivered personally when they least expected it. "You realize," Jonathan said, "this will destroy them financially, completely." "They destroyed themselves," I replied, my voice calm as still water. "I'm just presenting the bill." My phone buzzed. Another missed call from David, the 4th one today. He was getting desperate, probably wondering why his credit cards weren't working, why the bank was asking uncomfortable questions. Let him wonder. Panic was a dish best served cold, and I was about to serve a feast. "When do you want this served?" Jonathan asked, tapping the eviction notice. I smiled, and it felt like winter moonlight on a blade's edge. "Christmas dinner," I said. "Right after they make their little announcement about my supposed incompetence." Jonathan's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. "You're going to let them hang themselves first?" "They've been digging their own grave for months. I'm just going to hand them the shovel." I stood gathering the documents into a leather portfolio. The weight of them felt like justice itself, dense and inescapable. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "I want you there, as a witness." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "At Christmas dinner?" "Consider it a holiday bonus. You'll want to see this." The snow was falling harder as I left the law office, each flake a promise of the storm about to break. My phone buzzed again. David, still calling, still desperate. I let it go to voicemail, imagining his panic as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. They wanted to declare me incompetent. Tomorrow night they'd learn what competence really looked like. The dining room glowed like a stage set, candles flickering across Elena's best china, while the scent of roasted turkey mingled with pine from the Christmas tree. The mahogany table groaned under the weight of holiday dishes, but the real feast was about to be served cold. Family and friends filled the chairs, Linda wringing her hands, my cousins Tom and Sarah whispering nervously, the Hendersons from next door looking uncomfortable in their Sunday best. At the head of the table, David stood in his new suit, wineglass raised like a scepter, Rebecca beside him in a dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. I sat at the far end, hands folded, a plain manila envelope resting beside my plate like a sleeping serpent. Jonathan sat 3 seats down, officially introduced as an old family friend. His presence had raised a few eyebrows, but no one questioned it. They would soon enough. "Thank you all for being here," David began, his voice carrying that practiced sincerity he'd perfected over the years. "This Christmas is special because it's about family, about doing what's right for the people we love." Rebecca nodded solemnly, her performance worthy of an Oscar, the concerned daughter-in-law, bearing the heavy burden of caring for her husband's declining father. "But there's something difficult we need to discuss," David continued, his gaze finding mine across the table. "Something that affects all of us." The room fell silent except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of those who'd been primed for this moment. David cleared his throat, his confidence building. "As you all know, Dad has been struggling lately. His judgment isn't what it used to be. His finances are in chaos. We're worried about his safety, his ability to care for himself." Linda shifted uncomfortably. Tom frowned. The Hendersons exchanged glances. "It breaks our hearts," Rebecca chimed in, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "But we can't ignore the signs anymore. Robert needs help, professional care, supervision." "That's why," David said, raising his glass higher. "We've made the difficult decision to petition for guardianship. It's not about control. It's about love, about protecting him from himself." A gasp rippled through the room. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. This was their moment of triumph, their public declaration of my incompetence. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood. Every eye turned to me, expecting the confused protests of a senile old man. Instead, I smiled. "That's quite a speech, son," I said, my voice calm as still water. "Very touching, very well rehearsed." David's confidence flickered for just a moment. "Dad, please, we're trying to help you." "Help me?" I picked up the manila envelope, its weight satisfying in my hands. "Like you helped yourselves to my bank accounts? Like you helped yourselves to plan selling my house behind my back?" Rebecca's face went pale. "Robert, you're confused. We never—" "Oh, but you did." I opened the envelope, pulling out a thick stack of papers. "See, the funny thing about modern technology is that everything leaves a trail. Every phone call, every text message, every recorded conversation." I let that sink in for a moment, watching their faces drain of color. "Did you know," I continued conversationally, "that you've been living rent-free in my house while racking up $18,000 in credit card debt? Did you know that your investment condo is 3 months behind on payments and facing foreclosure?" David started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not finished. Did you know that I have a recording of you two, right here in this very room, planning to declare me incompetent so you could steal my house and dump me in some cheap apartment?" The silence was deafening. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. I pulled out the first document. "This is an eviction notice, David. You have 30 days to get out of my house." His wineglass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor like his dreams. "This," I continued, producing another paper, "is a complete financial freeze on every account you've been pillaging. Every credit card, every line of credit, every penny you thought you could steal. Gone." Rebecca lurched to her feet. "You can't do this. We'll fight you in court." With what lawyer? I asked pleasantly. You're broke. Completely, utterly broke. And getting broker by the minute. Jonathan cleared his throat softly. If I may, he said, standing. I'm Jonathan Pierce, Mr. Wilson's attorney. Everything you've just heard is completely legal and properly documented. Any attempt to contest these actions will result in criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. The room erupted. Linda started crying. Tom was on his feet, demanding explanations. The Hendersons were quietly gathering their coats. But I only had eyes for David and Rebecca, watching their faces cycle through shock, denial, and dawning horror as they realized their perfect plan had collapsed around them, like a house of cards in a hurricane. You see? I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. I'm not the incompetent old fool you thought I was. I'm the man who built this house, this life, this family, and I'm the man who's tearing down the lies you built on my foundation. David's shoulders shook, his face crumpling. Dad, please. We can work this out. We didn't mean... You meant every word, I said flatly. You recorded it yourselves. Rebecca grabbed his arm, her mask finally slipping completely. We're sorry, Robert. We'll make it right. Just don't do this. I looked at them. Really looked at them. These two people who'd taken my love, my trust, my home, and tried to turn it all into their personal playground. I gave you everything, I said quietly. My house, my savings, my unconditional love. And you repaid me by trying to steal my dignity. I gathered the papers, slipping them back into the envelope. 30 days. After that, you're trespassing. The front door beckoned in the distance, its frame outlined by the hallway's soft light. Several guests were already moving toward it, unwilling to witness the complete destruction of a family. I turned my back on David and Rebecca, their pleas falling on deaf ears. The dining room that had once been filled with Elena's laughter now echoed with the sound of consequences coming home to roost. They'd set the stage for my humiliation. Instead, they'd choreographed their own destruction. And the best part? I'd done it all completely legally, using nothing but their own greed and stupidity against them. Justice, it turned out, was the sweetest dish of all. The chaos behind me faded as I walked toward the hallway, leaving David and Rebecca to face the wreckage of their schemes. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of reclaiming my life. Tonight, I'd simply enjoy the sound of their world crashing down. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, boxes stacked neatly against the walls, sunlight streaming through windows that faced the city skyline. The space was smaller than the house, but it was mine, truly mine, free from the ghosts of betrayal and broken promises. The house had sold quickly to a young couple with 2 small children. I'd watched from across the street as they carried boxes through the front door, their laughter echoing from the rooms where Elena and I had once built our dreams. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt, like setting a broken bone. David and Rebecca had vanished after that Christmas dinner, their belongings cleared out before the eviction deadline. I'd heard through Linda that they'd moved in with Rebecca's mother in Cleveland, their credit destroyed, their marriage hanging by threads as thin as their excuses. I didn't feel sorry for them. Not anymore. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a text from Marcus asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I smiled, typing back a yes. Life was simpler now, quieter, but it was honest in a way it hadn't been for years. On my desk sat a single framed photo, Elena at our wedding, her smile radiant as morning sunlight. Next to it lay a letter I'd written but never sent, an explanation to David that would never be needed now. Some bridges once burned were better left as ash. I walked to the window looking out at the city below. Cars moved like ants, people hurried along sidewalks. Life continued its relentless forward march. Somewhere out there, David and Rebecca were learning what it meant to face consequences. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. No voices plotting in the next room. No fake smiles hiding real daggers. No love being weaponized against me. For the first time in years, I was free. I opened my laptop and began typing, a letter to the veterans organization that would receive my estate when I was gone. Real charity for real need, not the manufactured crisis of spoiled children who'd confused inheritance with entitlement. The sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new choices that were mine alone to make. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited. Now I was simply Robert Wilson, engineer, widower, survivor. A man who'd learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face the consequences of their choices. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted it without listening. The past was finished. The future was whatever I chose to make it. And for the first time in years, that future looked bright. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of karma catching up with those who deserve it. Let me know in the comments what you think should happen to David and Rebecca next. And don't forget to check out our other videos. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thanks for watching, and remember, treat people right, because you never know when they might surprise you.